Miss Maria Newman. In the other corner, they're not going to battle each other. They're going to bring us and enlighten our minds to the world of Beethoven. And I think what's been most interesting researching for this food for thought is to think of Beethoven before he was Beethoven, and how it must have felt back in that day to hear music from someone who maybe wasn't quite as well established as he certainly is now. So Brian and Maria are going to take us back a couple centuries, and away we go. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's my delight to be here once again. I was here last year for your music, and a wonderful talk about the music that you've written, and now we've got Beethoven this year, and this incredible piece, which actually I played on my choral music program this morning. If any of you were up at 6:15 this morning, you heard this music, and I just absolutely adore this Mass in C major, which to me feels like it's sort of a little bit under the radar. Does it feel that way to you?
I think so, definitely.
Yeah.
Am I on?
You are.
Yes, okay. To me, yes, I mean, so many people, so many of the musicians in the orchestra, the instrumental musicians, at rehearsal said that they had, why had they never played this amazing piece before? And so I think maybe that's overtaken by the great use of Solemnis and other works that, Beethoven wasn't as well known maybe in a general sense for choral music as a whole. He was known, yes, for choral music. He struggled so with his opera, Fidelio, wrote several overtures that have become staples of the repertoire in and of themselves individually, the Leonore overtures. And he was, of course, known so well as a symphonist and a chamber music writer, composer of chamber music, piano trios, concerti, etc. So maybe this is part of the reason why.
Yeah. Well, this piece has such an interesting history, and I don't get to get into it on the radio. I've got 2 minutes at the most to introduce a piece of music before they say, "Shut up and play the music." But fortunately, we've got time here to really dive into what this piece was all about. The story behind it is just absolutely incredible. And the story really begins with Joseph Haydn, doesn't it?
Definitely. So Joseph Haydn, or Franz Joseph Haydn as he is known to some, was in the employ of the Esterházy family, a family in Hungary that really, like Westwood Presbyterian Church, I might add, really supported, now we say classical music when we refer to all of concert music, say from the medieval period up to what's being composed now for the concert stage. But at that point, I guess it really was actually classical era music as well as being classical music. The Esterházys were the ones in Europe that really had a staff composer, of course, who was Haydn, which we're going to get into. He had a staff orchestra. He had, and of those members of the orchestra, of course, then he had string quartet players, and he allowed Haydn to be extremely prolific. And he may have been prolific anyway, but in this case, he had a way, forgive me, Haydn, for practicing. He practiced, in a sense, with these musicians that were there because they were able to premiere all of these pieces. So we wrote one quartet, another quartet, and they were always done. You could always hear, make changes, and not all musicians, especially today, have that wonderful opportunity of having staff musicians at their beck and call. So I think that's really significant for Haydn. So he became known as the father of the symphony, wrote 100 and something symphonies, and dozens and dozens of string quartets, also known as the father of the string quartet, and then by no connection was known to his musicians, the musicians in his employ, and of course his employer's employ, they called him Papa Haydn, because of his amicable and lovely, affectionate ways.
Yeah, and his musicians loved to work for him. So, he was a boss, he was a management type who was really good to his employees. For example, the Esterházys had this palace just outside of Vienna. Well, it's just outside in terms of car miles, 30 miles, but back in the day, it took them a few hours to get out there. And they would spend weeks and months on end out there at the palace outside of the city of Vienna. So the musicians all men in this day, would be out there with the Esterházys. They would be at work for months and months and months, and their wives and their children would be back in the city, in Vienna, and both sides, the kids and the wives, would be lonely for their husbands. The husbands would want to go back and visit their families, and they couldn't because they were playing in the orchestra. And it got so bad at one point that that Haydn said, you know what, I've got to make a point. I've got to advocate on behalf of my musicians to the Esterházys. And so he wrote this symphony where one by one, at the end, the musicians would get up and leave the stage. You know the Farewell Symphony? That's the story behind the Farewell Symphony. It was Haydn saying, would you please let my musicians have a bit of vacation and go back to visit their families? So a little bit of musical activism. But so much great music making also happened at this Esterházy palace just outside Vienna. And so, Haydn just, was able to have great compositional freedom, and he was able to be independent of what was going on in Vienna at the time. And so he said that was a great benefit. I'm not exactly sure the quote exactly is something like, I was forced to become original because there was nothing else around me. There was no musical influence from anywhere around me.
Right. It seems interesting too with Haydn. He wrote all of these pieces, and he continued to write them, as you can see by the numbers, the sheer numbers of pieces. They all are really wonderful pieces. And I think sometimes Haydn is overlooked in the shadow of Mozart and Beethoven. And so even though he was the older of the composers, he was born in 1832, is that right? 1732, and died in 1809. Mozart was born in 1756, and Beethoven was born in 1870. Teachers, thank you. Right. But anyway, as the sort of mentor, in a sense, of these younger composers, he still amassed a great amount of music that each has its own individual character. So many of these pieces, this Farewell Symphony, perhaps, I don't know if it was named for Farewell Symphony then or later. We don't know, right?
Most of the nicknames came from other people.
Exactly.
A lot of times after the fact.
Exactly, as did the Bird String Quartet that we're playing today, which was...
Because the musicians wouldn't have named it the Farewell Symphony. They would have named it the Vacation Symphony. That makes more sense from their standpoint.
Yes, because they were coming back to their employ. But each of them really do have these unique elements about them in material and emotion. And so, as Brian was saying, many of them, there's the Lark, and there's the Surprise Symphony, and all these things. Okay.
One week they had a bunch of extra French horn players, and so Haydn wrote a symphony that has a bunch of extra parts for the French horns, and it was called the Horn Signal. And so he went with what he had at the time, and then the audiences or the nobility or whoever would hear the piece of music, and they would say, "Oh, that reminds me of such and such," and they would give it their title. Right.
Well, Haydn, it seems to me, and Brian can correct me if his opinion is different, that he was lucky also in that his music seemed to be well liked. So he was able to go on and I don't know what the struggle, I haven't seen his original manuscripts. Beethoven's, as you may well know, were scribbled over and torn up and very, very messy. And so that was a very different, Beethoven was tortured. I don't see Haydn as a tortured person. I see him as a well-actualized, well-rounded person, whereas Beethoven really had that mercurial personality. But I still want to say, as we get into this in our comparison to Haydn and Beethoven and their relationship, that Haydn really did influence Beethoven and Mozart in a lot of ways. So where people think Sturm und Drang came with Beethoven, meaning the storm and stress and ups and downs and the heat of the weather goes up and then comes back down and becomes mercurial, suddenly is all Beethoven. But yes, Beethoven did incorporate that into his language in an extremely meaningful way, but it did come before him. Haydn has plenty of Sturm und Drang in his own writing, as does Mozart. So even if you would listen to some late, maybe even not such late Mozart, of course the guy was pretty young when he passed away, right, 36 years old. but you would maybe have a hard time telling in the classical era who had written the later pieces of Mozart and the early pieces of Beethoven. But one big thing, though, that we'll be getting into now is that Prince Esterhazy. And there was Paul Esterhazy, I believe, who was the former, and when he passed away, his son kept Haydn in his employ. I think that is right. And so that's why I'm saying the Esterhazy family was so dedicated to this. But then Beethoven received a commission that for many years Haydn had received, and that was Princess Esterhazy's birthday commission. So what she wanted for her birthday, or what Prince Esterhazy thought she ought to have for her birthday,
more accurate,
right,
yeah.
exactly, was a work of some sort, a commission that was to be dedicated to her on her birthday. And I think that's actually really, really neat. But Beethoven went to write the very mass that we're going to hear tonight, the Opus 86, and he wrote this as a commission from Esterhazy while Haydn, no, it was 1807, right?
1807.
Yes.
Yes.
So, okay. But anyway, the commissions that Haydn had before, now Beethoven has this commission one time. And the commission has high stakes, and the bar is so high. Both.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, Haydn had done this for many, many years, and he had quit writing the commission for the princess's birthday, I think in 1802. So there were 5 years before Beethoven got the commission. And in the intervening years, it was composers that were well known in their day, but for whatever reason, we don't really remember much of what they did, except for the guy who did it in 1806, the year before Beethoven. And his name was Johann Nepomuk Hummel, who was a student of Haydn's, a fellow student of Haydn's with Beethoven. So Hummel and Beethoven knew each other. Hummel actually, when Beethoven came to town, Hummel was already studying with Haydn, and Hummel said, "Oh dear, here's my rival. This guy knows what's up." And it wasn't much of a rivalry, right? Because, he won.
Somebody else like Hummel's music.
Hummel's music is great.
It is great.
Hummel's music is great, but this is, so for example, any Dodger fans in the house?
Oh yeah.
Dodger fans in the house. You remember Chad Billingsley?
Yeah.
Pitcher from 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. He was a great pitcher for a couple of years. He was a great pitcher, strikeouts, low ERA, 8 innings, played really, really well for a couple of years. And Clayton Kershaw came along, and there was this question. There was, who's better, Billingsley or Kershaw? Boy, you got Billingsley as the #1 starter, and Kershaw at #2. That's pretty good. He's all right. But Kershaw, had problems early, and he walked a lot of people, and he was almost as good as Billingsley for a while. And then Kershaw became Beethoven. We don't remember Billingsley as much. So Hummel was Billingsley, Kershaw was Beethoven, and Hummel had written the piece right before Beethoven, and Hummel was around for Beethoven's premiere the following year, in 1807.
That's right. That's so utterly fascinating. I can't tell you. There are 2 things I want to bring up. One is deafness, which I'll bring up in a minute, but getting still to the student-teacher or student-rival-student relationship. Many of you, I'm sure, saw the movie Amadeus, which is a fictional depiction of the life of Mozart as written by Peter Schaeffer, the fantastic playwright who also wrote Equus. And just to give you a tiny bit of background, Peter Schaeffer always seemed to take an incident that happened in real life and then create a whole, almost, it's still, of course, set in a historical fiction setting, but love about the set in the setting. Good, I sound like Jack Black. Okay. Yes, I could be rich. If only I were that funny. But in the movie Amadeus, or the play, as it were, because it was, and it is a fantastic play, long before it became a movie, there was a character in that movie called Antonio Salieri, who was a real-life character, but not in the same way that it was depicted in that movie. But Beethoven did study with Antonio Salieri. So that's kind of an interesting sort of bit of trivia to put in there. Beethoven, although he was a great admirer, and I think later wrote in his life that Haydn was in the same realm, in the same ranks, whatever you want to call it, excuse me, microphone, with Mozart and Bach, which is a huge compliment. During his time with Haydn, he bristled at being called Haydn's pupil. He didn't want to be somehow known as the apprentice, if you will, of Haydn at the time. And I think we all know how we feel about kids, right? When they're like, oh, mom and dad know nothing. And then later they think, okay, mom and dad, maybe they know a little something. So that's kind of an interesting point. But the other thing is that, to my knowledge, I have to qualify everything, to my knowledge, Haydn lived his entire life with his hearing. And Beethoven, of course, did not, and lost his hearing relatively early as compared to the Opus 86 that we will be hearing both a little bit, maybe a couple of clips now, and also at the concert, and of course, too many choir members already know it so beautifully. It's extraordinary to think that in terms of Haydn's output that I have been talking, and Brian have been talking about, and the fact that prolific, it was mellifluous, people liked it, it was not considered harsh, even though it did have the properties of Sturm und Drang, but Beethoven, perhaps, he was more free in his writing than Haydn in the end, because unless he had tinnitus or tinnitus or some ring in his ear or something, he was not bothered by influence in sound. Once he became deaf. Now again, I can't say this for sure, this is all conjecture, but what if is such a great point here. What if that is what led our world to where it is musically through Beethoven, because of something that was so horrifying to a composer and musician, to going deaf and then finally to become so deaf that you couldn't hear the very thing that your gift is from God. I mean, this is a heavenly, spiritual, incredible gift, and yet you can't hear. But did his pain actually bring even more greatness to the world and to the world beyond Beethoven's time? I think, just my own opinion of the answer, has got to be yes, it has got. And what kind of thought was going on in his mind, and the fact that he text painted, meaning took the words and set them musically so that the words, the music painted, okay, let's just say this. He's talking about ascension, the music goes up. He's talking about going down to hell, the music goes down. That's very simple, but that's what text painting is. And so I think that's a really wonderful, wonderful issue to keep in mind, or point to keep in mind when you're hearing what Beethoven has been able to do.
And let's be honest, that's a great lesson for us as human beings as well, to take something that is considered to be a negative quality of a human being, a disability, something that we consider, oh, that person doesn't have all of the things that are, maybe necessary to be a composer, but no, it actually became a tool, it became something that made the art, made the human being even greater, although the typical interpretation would be, oh yeah, that's a disability, but no, it was actually something that made that person even greater.
Yes, I love the possibility of that. I think it's amazing. And the fact, even with Charles Schulz, writing with Schroeder, remember in the cartoon, such a, how amazingly socially adept was Charles Schulz's view of the world, and certainly Beethoven. He was a huge Beethoven lover, and even had Schroeder, with his hands behind his back, perhaps taking a walk in the woods and thinking about, everything that Beethoven could do in Beethoven's right. But Beethoven had an amazing shell, we say, or set of tools prior to his deafness. And obviously, if he had been completely deaf from birth, maybe he could have heard some vibrations or something. It's interesting to think that how far music has gone these days to maybe he could have written a Pulitzer Prize winning piece that had to do with vibrations. I mean, there's just the world's limit. But he did have, or the sky's the limit, whatever the saying is. I don't know. I say swiveling idiot instead of sniveling idiot. And I honestly have to think about what I'm saying. I say war-hungry mongrel instead of warmonger. And my husband calls it Newmanisms. See the guys going, don't love him. Yeah, so Anyway, Beethoven did have, of course, an amazing education musically, and was, even if you want to take a visual, because I know we're so visual these days, and I can't say that I thought all that highly of the movie Immortal Beloved, but there were elements of it that I thought were exceptional. One was when he was supposedly writing for Elise, and he put his whole body over the piano so he could, please, could he just be able to hear? It was that was a wonderful scene. And then at the end, with his supposed Immortal Beloved, because in this movie, they decided that the Immortal Beloved was this particular woman in the movie. I think they were playing the slow movement of the Emperor Concerto at the end. I don't know if you know the movie, but the one that goes, that's the tenderness that Beethoven has. So how do you get this man? My husband is jealous of Beethoven because he's so he's so cute. He just said, if Beethoven were alive, you'd love Beethoven. Oh, now his music, yes, but that was very cute. Thank you, son, for loving me that much. But anyway, at the end of this movie, the Immortal Beloved, the woman that he would have married in the movie, was reading the letter, and the Emperor Concerto is going on, and that is one of the most tender moments in music. And that is what Brian and I were talking about ahead of time. And Brian was talking about in terms of a particular conductor conducting this Mass in C, and talking about directness versus trying to grab the tenderness out. I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the mercurial nature of Beethoven.
Yeah, I mean, here's the mark of a great artist is that, or any great art, is that you can look at it, or read it, or hear it, and come away with multiple interpretations. And even the same person can experience great art on separate occasions and come away with a different viewpoint of the art. And that's, I mean, with Beethoven, this is something that is just so strong. You can have every single conductor is going to bring something different to a piece. And so with a large work like something like this Mass, you can have the conductors that will lead it in a way that is just absolutely just warm and sort of a dark sound, a burnished sound, and really emphasize that sort of tender side of things. Or you can have conductors that this score and say, man, this piece of music has so much intensity and so much focus and so much directness of communicating the emotional message that they're going to go for a really kind of a bright sound and brisker tempos perhaps, and tell the chorus to be, I don't know what the technical term might be, but have that sort of focus to the sound so that it just, you're aiming at a little dot on the back wall when you're singing. So, there are all of these interpretations out there, and you can hear so many different things in this music. So,
no, I absolutely agree in every way. And so many of you may, I don't know if you know this, that the Music at Westwood Committee has wanted to name the whole evening the Sunny Side of Beethoven, or Beethoven's Sunny Side Up. And why is that? Why is that? Well, the reason the committee was working on that particular side of Beethoven is because so much, of course, of Beethoven is about torture. Was he grumpy? Was he mean? Hyde and everybody called Papa Hyde, and they just loved him, and Beethoven couldn't keep a job, and he probably got in trouble with the nobleman's daughters, and whatever happened.
It would have helped if he would have bathed from time to time.
That's right, exactly. You're safe, Scott. Right, Scott bathes. Okay. No, but seriously.
Important details that you would have missed.
So why did we pick this piece and this title of the program? Well, the piece, I want to tell you because so many of you are members here at Westwood Presbyterian Church, and this is one of the only churches, I mean, there are a handful, definitely, and some that are amazing, but in our country that still supports traditional and classical music in this fashion, in a fashion that is so, you lift everything up by doing it. And I personally thank you all for that so much. So thank you all. understand this love of music and need. Now, we have a very small sanctuary, and our sanctuary also, interestingly enough, though it's built like a hall church, is for, I imagine, maybe it's for visual too, but for speaking, the room it's a pretty sound, but it's on the dry side. It's not a cathedral-style hall church that would have, you could have done our timeless out of chant concert in without any fear that, you'd hear one little wrong thing because the room would cover that. And though that kind of music was written for that kind of acoustic. In this case, I don't actually know what the acoustics were like in the chambers. By the way, chamber music is called chamber music, chamber choir, chamber symphony, because they are all written for a smaller room. Beethoven's Mass very well may have been written for the most huge room of all. I don't know that, but I bring this up because of our room. So, the Beethoven can fit in our room. This Mass at C can fit in our room. So the scoring is a string body, which is always first violins and second violins, which are kind of like sopranos and altos. And then we have violas, which could be like tenors in the vocal section. We have cellos, which would be like a bass section. And then we have the double bass. And the double bass in this particular piece is absolutely indicative of its name, which is double bass. It doubles the cello part almost exactly. There are a couple of passage work spots, passage work meaning little faster notes that go by, that are not doubled by the double bass. They might play a quarter note where the, dum, and then the cello's playing da-da-da-da-dum, or something like that. But otherwise it's completely double bass. So we can fit that in. Then we have 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons, 2 trumpets, 2 French horns, timpani, and organ. And all of that we have to fit into this room. So if we were going to do, say, the Ninth Symphony, which is the only, probably the only of the symphonies of Beethoven's that we could do in this room, we would have to tear out all the pews probably, to halfway, and, because it's got many more instruments, especially with the folk elements in that particular piece. So this was a practical reason for choosing the Mass in C. Now, I wouldn't have chosen the piece that I didn't think was drop dead gorgeous. The piece is, as I was saying, is running into the middle period that gets into the late period at this point, because it's the Opus 86, and it still shows great homage to Mozart. There's dum 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 dum. No kidding, note for note in a yes, exactly. And a couple of other places in Marriage with the Crow again, where the Susanna there has the forgiveness at the end, whatever that is. And so he pays homage to Mozart. Now nowadays people say, oh, they're stealing. It's note for note. Get the lawyers. Get everything. This was absolute homage to the composers that had come before them. Obviously, Beethoven sounds like Beethoven, even if there are similarities in classical era style. Okay, and by the way, classical era, if you think of lovely long lines, Baroque music, which came before classical era, is very ornate. You look at the clothes, you look at the architecture of the music is the same way, and you hear Bach all the time, very complex music. Mozart, much simpler sounding music, not simpler internally or emotionally, very difficult to play, there's nothing to hide in, and that's not hide in, that's to hide in, you can't hide yourself, it's all very exposed, and that makes it really, really, really difficult. Hiding is definitely not the same way. So this piece is not one of Beethoven's darkest pieces. It's a very uplifting, Mass of the Ordinary piece. We have a Kyrie that opens, which is Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. It goes immediately into a Gloria. You know what that is, glory to God in the highest, and peace on earth, and all of that, which is wonderful. Goes to the third movement, which is Credo, which is essentially either the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed, depending on the setting. Usually it's the more complex of the creeds. It's very long. It goes by not as, it looks like it takes forever when you look at the word, but it's very word, yeah, so it goes by quickly.
Some credos.
Yeah, they go on forever, exactly, because it's really, really long. Yeah. Then we have a Sanctus and Benedictus, so it's just marked as Sanctus in the music, which is the Holy, 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 and then Blessed is He in the name of the Lord. Okay, and then finally we end with the Agnus Dei, which in this case opens with a very troubling, smoldering set of progressions where the orchestra builds and builds like Beethoven, and then it comes to the choir and it just explodes, and it's amazing, it's gorgeous. And then we get to this Dona Nobis Pacem, which is part of the Agnus Dei. So, Lamb of God who taketh away the sins of the world, grant us peace. That is so uplifting and so beautiful. And finally, full arc at the end of this extraordinary and jubilant work, we get back to the music of the Kyrie, but with the words Dona Nobis Pacem. It ends on a very beautiful, like you would want to wait about 3 full minutes before any applause began as it just went up. And one last thing before I turn it over to Brian again. I just have to say this is selfish on my part, totally selfish, because I love Beethoven so much, I can barely stand it. And I just love Beethoven so much. So, but there are elements of the 7th Symphony in this. If any of you know the 7th Symphony, it's what brought me to music. I told my parents, no, I don't want to study music. Everybody who's music in our family, I want to ride horses. So, anyway, I did end up getting the bug and had that. The 7th Symphony, I think many musicians who are instrumental musicians are in the same position. They love that second movement of the 7th Symphony. There are elements of that. There are also all these kinds of things over that Beethoven sort of takes from himself. And there's also a real Lenore sounding quote, one of Lenore overtures, which is really neat. So if any of you are Beethoven aficionados and you'd like to kind of do a trivia as to where you can find some of these things, it's really, really fun. I'm sure none of you are, but if you go crazy like me and you want to talk Beethoven, I'm your gal. Sorry, Brian, go right ahead.
Oh, you're good. No, Beethoven was my first favorite composer as well. It was, don't ask me why, but it was the choral fantasy that got me hooked on Beethoven. Which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's, you know, it's not his greatest work. But I loved it as a 9-year-old, and so I still love it. So unapologetically. So, do you want to hear some of the music? Let's listen to some of the music, yeah?
Sure.
So, I think this will work. I just love the way the piece opens, because we're talking about, you know, Beethoven in sort of an optimistic way, and, you know, you think about the text, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy. Usually this is text that is just so full of angst and darkness, and it's not that way.
It's tender.
Yeah.
It's
so
that side of Beethoven.
Let's see if this works. Oh, it just hang on.
Okay, while he's doing that, we want to talk to you a little bit about, before we leave, about, again, the relationship between Beethoven and Haydn and why we have chosen to compare the two composers on the program today. And so I think Brian's ready now. That was my song and dance while he got set up.
Like, Lord have mercy. No, that sounds like. Yeah, it's like, in a way, it's like, you know, I believe so much in what I'm singing that everything's going to be okay, even if I'm not in the place right now where everything is okay. I believe in the power of these words. I believe in the power of this music and what they mean.
Absolutely.
And so that's what sets the stage. I mean, those are the first notes that you're going to hear this evening.
That's right, and the last. That's exactly what you're going to hear at the end, only with the words Dona Nobis Pacem, and just unbelievable and tender music. So, I don't know if you want to play in any more spots.
Yeah. So it builds from there in the Kyrie. Things get bigger, and then it's Beethoven, so he sort of stays big. for a while. And really the first, I mean, the Kyrie, the Gloria, the Credo, I mean, this is all like music that's high energy, that's high intensity.
And then there are sections in both of these there, which Brian can attest to. We have, I believe it's three sort of sections. You could call them movements on their own, but they're all attacca. Attacca means moves directly from one to the next. And there is a beautiful andante mosso that is in 3, and that's we've got some soloists that come in on that, and it gives you a little bit of respite. But at that point, it's interesting because that is a moment when we actually have a little bit of angst. And then later, some of these moments that just are like a rainbow coming over. You'll hear a clarinet. This is much later in the piece, but a clarinet line that takes us from one place completely into a different universe. The et incarnatus est, which is, you know, when you have, I mean, this is all in Credo, I believe, because we're all talking about how, you know, how we all say it all the time, so we know how all the words move from one to the other. But Beethoven takes that and again sets it in this extremely tender fashion.
And I love when we arrive at the Sanctus, fourth movement. So we've had the Kyrie, the Gloria, which is, you know, excitement, the Credo, which there's a lot of energy in that as well, and it ends big. And then you get to Sanctus, which traditionally is, you know, also a big sort of heaven storming, holy, holy, holy. You know, this is a moment of praise. And Beethoven doesn't give you the giant, the huge, you know, all brass, all percussion, fortissimo right off the bat. Instead, his Sanctus, his holy, 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 is standing in the presence with just absolute awe. He's giving you the feeling of you're standing in the presence of something that, you know, is just so incredible that there aren't really words, and all you can do is say Sanctus. All you can do is say, this is holiness in my presence. It's one of the most humble things, I think, because you see that text and immediately you think, oh, I'm gonna go all out. I'm gonna pull out all the stops. And Beethoven just doesn't do that.
You know, this brings to mind, jumping ahead to very late Beethoven.
Yeah.
I am Maria Tangent Newman. Just in case you were sorry, that's supposed to be a joke, going off on a tangent here. Okay, so, but this incredible humility of which Brian is speaking, Beethoven came back from a set of great illnesses, and he was writing late string quartets, which were some of his latest works. In particular, the Opus 132, has, I believe, the third movement in the piece, divided up into, in my opinion, sets of the Trinity. It's always in threes. It always seems to be in threes. The chord progressions, the lines, the linear aspects, all seem to sort of line in threes. And I don't know, maybe I'm just making that up, but that's how we can all interpret things differently, right? But on the music, he writes a huge line. It must be 25, 30 words long, practically, that says, looking to the great God Almighty, from his humble servant for bringing me back from my illness in order to write this piece of Thanksgiving. Essentially, that's the, of course that's not what it says, but it is very close, in a much more eloquent way on the page than I am able to bring across to you here without reading it. But this is something that I think Beethoven had, was that tenderness always comes from that amazing humility, and I love it so much.
Yeah.
Did you want to?
Oh, I think it's save the rest of the music for this afternoon and evening. But why don't we talk just a little bit more about that connection with Haydn, because he quotes Haydn in this mass as well. Same key signature as the one that Haydn had written for the same princess 5 years prior. They're both masses in C major. And as I said, Haydn wrote his last one for the Esterházys in 1802. 1802 was also the same year that Beethoven really realized there's something going wrong with my hearing. And 1802 is the year that he wrote his very famous, it's called the Heiligenstadt Testament, basically where he confesses that he was going to kill himself, except for the fact that there was still music inside of him that he wanted to make sure got out. And so this was the same year. That was Haydn's last year writing the Mass. And so, you think about these connections between Haydn and Beethoven. And so the first time that Haydn gets this gig the first time Beethoven gets this gig that Haydn had and had had so successfully for so many years, Beethoven pays homage to the man who was his teacher, the man who was his predecessor in a way. So there's, again, I find that, we don't think of Beethoven as being particularly humble, but absolutely, paying homage to Haydn by writing a mass in the same key for the same employer, using little bits and pieces of lines from Haydn's music in this piece as well.
It's said that Beethoven's premiere did not go very well because some of the musicians did not show up for rehearsal. Obviously, there was no tradition for Beethoven's piece. It was brand new. Whenever you hear a piece, you've heard Beethoven's Fifth hundreds of times. At least, even when you don't know you've heard it. It's on some commercial or it's somewhere.
Every strikeout at Dodger Stadium.
Okay, so it's interesting to think that there is a tradition for us for hearing something like Beethoven's Fifth. So if somebody performs it terribly, it's not a terrible piece. You know that, right? You've heard it many times. But in this piece, in Beethoven's Mass in C, Opus 86, nobody had heard the piece before. Maybe people didn't show up to the rehearsal because Beethoven was a jerk. He was a jerk. Scott, what did you say about the sniveling idiots playing? I said sniveling, I did it right. Sniveling idiots playing his quartets, he didn't care, right?
Just somebody complained that the parts were unplayable.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he couldn't care less about your puling.
So maybe they didn't consider Beethoven Papa Beethoven. This was
what was that?
puling idiots?
Violin? No.
Puling violinists.
Or instrument.
Yeah, puling instruments. Yeah, I love that. In this case, perhaps the instrumentalists that were used to being in Haydn's employ at Esterházy, now we're dealing with Beethoven, if indeed the premiere was to take place there, could not stand working with him. Maybe that's why they didn't show up. Who knows? Maybe he made some pass at some woman, and because apparently it was some of the singers who didn't show up, and they weren't men.
All but one of the altos.
Exactly. But there could have been countertenors that were singing altos. I guess we could. But I'm just choosing for my own jollies that they were women. So, maybe he said something bad to them. But so he gets there, and the piece apparently, it's not going to go very well. You don't have any rehearsals. So Esterházy said, "What did you write there, Beethoven?" And Beethoven was so mad, there was no tradition for how beautiful the piece was supposed to be, that Beethoven quit his employ that very same day, walked out. I don't know what happened to the piece. Brian maybe can fill us in on that after it happened. But one thing that Beethoven did have and Haydn had in common that is really wonderful is that their works were premiered, most of them, in their lifetime. Most of them. Works by Schubert, who died when he was 32 years old. What would we have gotten? Somebody just brought this up to me recently. If Schubert died when he was 32, and he had 4 more years to write until he was 36, the year that Mozart died, or he had, you know, X amount of years more to live till Beethoven was 57 or something like that, or yeah, and when he died, how much more would they have written at that point? But some of Schubert's music was not even premiered until decades after his death. And likewise with Bach, since he was a church musician, and I always say that's what I want to be. I want to be like Bach, only not as good. But Bach's music went into obscurity, and it took medicine to find that music, and yada yada yada. All this comes together. So that was my tangent. But back on, I told you Maria, tangent, Newman. Okay, so just say hi, tangent. I'll say hi right back. So anyway, there was no tradition for that sound. So he left, and we don't know, or I don't know, what happened to the piece afterwards in his performance life. I do know that this piece is one of the great pieces of Beethoven. I do know that it has a huge array, huge gamut of emotional range, of an emotional range in this setting, and that there's great contrast in the piece, that it is uplifting, it is joyful, it has enough angst in it that it won't leave you bored for absolutely 1 second, and you will, in my opinion, you will absolutely love it. So why did we compare this with Haydn's Bird string quartet? Okay, well, back to practicality for 1 second. We talked about looking at various pieces of Beethoven that would actually fit in our space, in a chamber space, not in a huge orchestra space. So that was one of the things. So I would not have picked a piece I didn't love. And so we also have money issues. In Haydn's time, I'm sure they had money issues too, but the royalty was subsidizing these composers. Nowadays, we've got, you know, human beings in our congregation that are so graciously putting these concerts on. We could never do them, never, without each and every one of your support in any way you give it, whether it's monetary or in kind or anything. That is hugely appreciated. So we chose a string quartet because it costs less to put on the first 15 minutes of the program. And the string quartet, of course, is one of the great genres of all time, and I think some composers have written their very greatest works, including Beethoven and Haydn, in the string quartets. We'll be playing the Bird. It's Opus 33, number 3. What if that doesn't mean anything to anybody? I'm so sorry. We're so into these Opus numbers. It's like saying Brian Lauritzen, and you could just change his name to Opus 33, number 3. So you can just say, oh yes, Opus 33, number 3 is coming to talk with us today. Sorry, that's how much we look towards these Opus numbers. They take on sort of a persona for us.
Get smart. They had
99,
86.
I want to be Opus 132 if I get to be like that. So anyway, the Opus 33 number 3 is, you know, maybe a middle-ish piece of Haydn from a set. Although at the turn of the century, when this was coming into the 1800s, Beethoven and Haydn were both, is it Lobkowitz? Is that Prince Lobkowitz had commissioned the two of them simultaneously to write sets of string quartets. When those string quartets were premiered, published, actually premiered maybe not, because Beethoven's were premiered for like 12 people in some
not public.
Yeah, exactly. But there were more favorable comments in a big way towards Beethoven's Opus 18 string quartets 1 through 6 over a period of time, I assume. But then there were for the Opus 77, I believe, of Haydn, those quartets were 1799, and I believe the Opus 18 were maybe 1801. So Haydn stopped writing string quartets all together. There's one posthumous, or not, I'm sorry, not posthumous, unfinished. It's Opus 103. I don't know. It's something. Maybe I'm just getting the date. Maybe it's 1803, and I'm getting that wrong. But he never wrote another string quartet again because he was so intimidated. Perhaps did not want. I say perhaps again, conjecture. Perhaps did not want the comparison between himself and the younger composer, and likewise, I read that Haydn had stopped certain types of writing in certain types of genres because Mozart had been so successful in some of these genres as well.
Which is funny because Haydn taught Mozart how to write string quartets.
Exactly.
Mozart wrote a set of string quartets and dedicated them to Haydn.
They're called the Mozart-Haydn quartets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you ever see the Mozart-Haydn quartets and get confused, it's understandable.
But they are by Mozart and they are dedicated to Haydn. And they're the best of Mozart's string quartets, definitely, although there are some.
But isn't that interesting? Someone like Joseph Haydn, who is the father of the symphony and the father of the string quartet, and really, you know, if you think about where symphonies, the history of the symphony, you know, until Haydn came around, symphony meant, you know, kind of anything. And it could, there was no established form. There was not, you know, a usual like first movement, big expositional statement, and then a slow movement, and then a dance movement, and then a finale. Until Haydn said that's how it's going to be, and then everyone's like, oh yeah, that's how it should be. And then it stayed that way for years and years and years and years and years. And Beethoven didn't really change much in that aspect of what a symphony was. Brahms, Dvorak, Tchaikovsky, everybody, until Mahler, really. And then Mahler blew everything up. But Haydn said, this is what a symphony is going to be, and everyone said, yeah, that's what a symphony is. Haydn established this, and yet to have the sort of insecurity about a string quartet, to say, you know what, maybe I'm done.
Yeah, and very maybe because he didn't write it.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
In 1799, and that was it for him. Another tangent I think is an interesting one. Brian was talking about, you know, starting with an exposition. If some of you are interested in trying to hear sometimes this sonata form or symphony form, but it's actually called sonata form. I will leave that explanation for another day. But it's kind of like saying classical music. Yes, classical music. Yes, exactly. What does that really mean? But if you have a thesis and you write your thesis, and then you have it so explains everything, and then you have the body of your paper, and that sort of develops ideas on your thesis, and then you come back to your conclusion, and that might sort of just restate what it was in your thesis that you've now proven. And that's kind of the same sort of thing that happens in sonata or sonata-like form, which these symphonies are written in that you've got opening themes, and then you've got a development of those themes, and they take little elements of the exposition and go finally into what we call the recapitulation, which then restates what you heard at first. And that sometimes is really interesting. An easy form to hear is a rondo form because it's say a chorus that just keeps coming back, and you've got different music in between. But you've got the chorus, then different music, then the chorus, then different music again, then the chorus, and yet different music. And it really does help when you're listening to try to see where those, or listen and hear where those things might happen. So I challenge you to do that. Oh, yes?
Did Beethoven ever get a chance while he was living to have this mass we're hearing today played right?
That's what we don't know. Yeah, we're going to research that.
Well, it's a good question because it was performed privately for its first performance. And then its first public performance wasn't as a whole mass. Its first public performance came on one of these giant marathon concerts that included the premieres of the 5th Symphony and the 6th Symphony and the 4th Piano Concerto and a few movements of this mass. So here,
Where did that take place?
So this was in Vienna, and this was in the middle of December, and it was freezing cold in the concert hall, and everyone was uncomfortable. And tell me if you'd like to go to this concert. It starts with Beethoven Symphony No. 6. Then there's a concert aria called A per Fido. Then they performed the Gloria movement of this mass. Then Beethoven came out and played the 4th Piano Concerto, a couple of hours in so far. Then there was an intermission. Then they came back and played the 5th Symphony. Then they performed the Sanctus and Benedictus movements of this mass. Then Beethoven played a solo piano improvisation for we don't know how long. Then they played the choral fantasy.
Your favorite.
20, 30-minute piece. And then they were done. So this is like a 4-hour concert. And it was freezing cold in the theater in Vienna. And, you know, among other things, you know, people were most interested in the piano concerto because performers, composers were what it was all about. And they were most interested in the Sixth Symphony. And guess what went under the radar? The Mass, of course, and also the Fifth Symphony. No one really paid that much attention to the Fifth Symphony because it came after 2 hours of music and everybody sort of, their mind was wandering anyway, and they were freezing cold. And no one, like, people's reaction to the Fifth Symphony was like, oh, okay.
That's sad.
So, you know, it took time for things to come around and people to realize, like, oh, between the Fifth and Sixth Symphony, the Fifth is, you know, probably a greater artistic statement. Nothing wrong with the Sixth, but everyone at first loved the Sixth more.
Well, it's interesting. If I may, I love rebuttals, and thank God for the internet. That is fabulous. Yes, that is amazing. Okay, they have the Sixth Symphony. You know, Disney took the Sixth Symphony and wrote, had some of the artists in Fantasia write to that. So I was not impressed with that particular interpretation, although I did love some of the ones that Stokowski did with the Bach. But in the Sixth Symphony is definitely a different piece than the Fifth. And in my opinion, my own opinion, those two are very difficult to compare. The greatest symphony perhaps in the world, of course you'll say that at every symphony you're playing at the time. That's the great thing about music. What's your favorite piece? Oh, right now Beethoven Master C, Bird Quartet. Yes, exactly. But the Sixth Symphony is so different. It paints a picture of pastoral life. It truly is a programmatic piece in a loosely based sense, and is so apples and oranges from the Fifth Symphony. In my opinion, also, when you hear something that's easier to listen to, or that depicts the rainstorm and depicts the thunder, that you can really sink your teeth into the first time, because this is all music, much easier to like on Presbyterian. I don't know if you will agree with me on there. That the Fifth Symphony is a piece of absolute music, which means it's written for itself. So, yes. Okay, so I don't know if we're probably
overtime, yeah.
We have about 5 more minutes for questions. If anyone has any more questions.
No, what you'd like to know. Yes.
Yeah, I was fascinated to hear that this piece was commissioned as a birthday present, because I always imagined that masses were commissioned for church services. Was this played in a church in Vienna or elsewhere at some point in the early 19th century?
We'll have to look that one up.
Not that we know of. Yeah, not that we know of. I mean, it was performed privately at the Esterhazy's place for its first performance.
Right.
And so, you know, maybe they performed it in one of their chapels on their, you know, property or whatever. But the first public performance was it's just in a concert hall.
Right, and the mass of the ordinary, of course, was what they used, and I assume that people were very moved. And also, Haydn had written that C major mass 5 years earlier. Perhaps that was the inspiration for a mass itself from Beethoven. But still unanswerable questions. I don't know. I'm very inspired by the church music.
Yes.
Church
and state were sort of.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Church and state were integrated. The answer is
some cases, the king was godlike.
Right. Did you all hear what this beautiful lady said? Yeah. So church and state were integrated. So it was one and the same.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Awesome.
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment and a challenge.
Okay.
The comment is that what Maria said a long time ago about if Beethoven had lived longer, maybe he would have done something with vibrations. It raised a memory of something I heard from a professor at Blvd University, who's a university for the deaf. In the deaf community, they have dances.
Right.
And they crank up the music real loud so that they can hear the vibrations and the beats and so on to it. So you might be right. The challenge is this. We at Westwood Presbyterian Church, Maria Newman.
Maria Tangent.
No, not Tangent. We have done world premieres of pieces, like for J.K. Hilbert and so on. So anytime, and we've helped him, you know, given him feedback as he was composing. So anytime you want to perform compose a choral piece,
I accept.
he'll be glad to help you with it.
You almost did a premiere last year, right? It was 20 years later. But yes, I accept. Thank you.
That's great. That's great. You know, an interesting fact about Beethoven is, and you may have heard this, but he sawed the legs off his piano. So he sat down on the floor. And this is later in his life when he really had lost his hearing. So the vibrations were part of, you know, his compositional process as well. And there's a great percussionist that's performing around the world today, Evelyn Glennie, and she plays. She's completely or nearly deaf, and she plays barefoot. She performs barefoot. The vibrations uses that from the floor. So, yes.
I have a comment and question about deafness in music. 40 years or so ago, I had a close friend who could absolutely play anything on his little green upright piano that he carried around in his pickup truck because he played for everything in town and actually made money, made a living from doing this. And we were talking one time, I was circle of friends, 10 or 12 of us, and I asked him, I said, how can you play everything? Have you ever seen the sheet music for all of the stuff you play? He said, no. So I said, innocently, so you play everything by ear? He said, I don't play by ear, I play by thought.
That's beautiful.
And I thought to myself, it made me understand what I thought at the time, Beethoven's deafness a little bit.
That's
That you actually hear the music in your head. That's what he did.
Absolutely.
Rather than, I don't know what you call that hearing. It doesn't go through the ear canal, but what is it? Anyway, that's my question.
No, so you have a question on that? You were saying that
what is hearing in your head?
Hearing in the head, and that's a really good point. So maybe it's just a representation of what your thought process is. Otherwise, why would everybody write something different or even perform something different, even the same person from time to time? But I think hearing can be different for different people. I know Scott and I, just bring up my husband because we've had these discussions a lot, Scott and I definitely hear things differently. And so I wonder if we've come to a common ground of what we hear as a population, but actually what you're hearing. Because I think people hear on different layers of perception. But scientifically speaking, I could not speak to what it actually means, how it affects the anvil and the stirrup and the all of that, and then goes into the brain. But I do know that even people with perfect pitch, just say from they can hear a certain amount of vibrations per second or per millisecond, and are those people in a way imprisoned with what they can hear? Whereas with people that do not have perfect pitch but have beautiful relative pitch could hear a lot more and not be bothered by that imprisonment of, no, that has to be a 340 or a 448. Better not be a 348. 448. Yeah, really? Pretty low. Yeah. So, but I think that, I don't know if you could speak to that, Brian.
If you think about it in terms of reading comprehension, so when you learn how to read, you start by sounding out the words, and it's sort of like the phonics aspect of how you learn to read. And so eventually you don't have to say the words out loud to know what the word means on the page. Now you read words and we know what they mean without having to speak them and then hear them back to us. So this is something that, as a sort of former, now really non-musician, I don't understand. I can't comprehend how to look at a piece of music and hear what the music is. But a musician can look at the music and you can hear the music. And so you hear about these particularly conductors who, have these lifestyles where they're just jet setting all around the world, and they have their, their scores on the plane, and they're studying. And you think, how can you do that? How can you're practicing on the plane? But they can do it because you look at the music because of all of your training, and you develop the comprehension level to such a degree that you don't have to hear the thing back in order to understand what the roadmap is on page. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense, yeah. I mean, it's like just saying, here, okay, I have to reach my hand out grab the water. You know, we never think about that, and it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a skill that you learn. But your friend who said I play by thought or I perform by, it really is brilliant. But essentially, when you say play by ear, you just meant what your idea was that you're not taking information from a page visually, you're taking it from the world around you. And I think essentially you're probably saying the same thing. He just put it into a much more pinpointed thought.
I think for some people too, when they play by ear, because I'm thinking about people I've known that play the piano, for instance, by ear. They don't play the notes as the composer composed them. They play the melody
They get close, yeah.
with their own modifications.
That's right.
But when you hear it as a well-trained musician, you do hear the notes. There's a big difference.
Absolutely. So when blind musicians learn to play, that's always been a thought. Do they go by Braille, and what do they do? Do they learn just by listening to previous people before them and say before recordings previous performers? But I find that really kind of interesting too, as to how you know that just seems to bring in yet another layer of how music really speaks to everybody. That everybody's willing to learn it. But I'm not sure that a blind person is any more handicapped, so to speak, than a seeing person.
Just comment. In Angel City Chorale, we have 2 blind singers, and they do use
Braille.
They sing from Braille.
Right. And they have to sing within an ensemble. Doug was saying that in Angel City Chorale, they have several blind singers that do use the Braille editions too. Blind singers that do use Braille editions, and that's a particularly good point too, because those 2 blind musicians have to sing exactly the same thing that the other sighted musicians are singing. So it wouldn't be a solo. If you're doing a solo, of course you can. You have leeway, artistic license.
All right.
Okay, we hear the string quartet first, correct?
Right.
Okay, so then when we're hearing the Mass, will we recognize ourselves the parts that Beethoven used from this string quartet?
There are not, to my knowledge, we are representing Haydn with the string quartet, but those particular melodies that are in the string quartet are not utilized in this particular Mass. But you will hear some very familiar Mozart, same era, some very familiar Mozart moments in the Mass that I know you'll recognize. Such as, you'll hear that, It's,
so is there anything in particular in the Mass that we should know or hear or listen for or be surprised by? Or, I mean, I just wonder if there's something that will help us to be better listeners tonight.
Right, so I would just say, I know I don't have time, but I would love to say that if you listen to the emotional contrasts, if you look, there is a misprint, but you guys can all laugh over it. It does say on you stage, this is what you'll have. You'll have a, cheat sheet, a lyrics text page, if you will. And it will have mostly the Latin with the English next to it. They don't always add up perfectly, but they're close. And of course they are translations. It did say Agnes Day instead of Agnes Day. So we would all have a friend Agnes Day. Yes, exactly. But if you are able to tell what some of the singers, look at their mouths, listen to what they're saying diction-wise, and see if the words actually mean what, if Beethoven's talking about, there's a descending, so it's descending, and so it goes descending, if you see things like that, it's really interesting, the textual painting, and it's very, very clear, but I will end my portion, not any for Brian, but my portion, just by saying that it's all what you want to think of it. It's all what it means to you. And secondly, that it sometimes takes study to really, really see what's inside music. It's not the kind of music that you just listen to and it's like, oh, okay, I'm in the spa and I'm listening, it's casual. This music, it may hit you really strongly the first time, but I assure you, if you listen to it again and again, or you get in a community orchestra and you play it, or a community choir and you sing it, that all that music starts to make so much more sense and makes it even more meaningful. And if you're a dedicated listener and that is what you do, you have no idea how important you are to the musicians who are on the stage. The symbiosis between audience and performer is essential. If the performers know you're supporting them, they are going to do their best for you because you're coming together in a symbiosis. So.
Yeah, that's really well said. The only thing I would add to that, and just sort of bouncing off what you're saying, is the thing that I love the most about this particular piece is that just Beethoven just doesn't mess around. It's right there for you. And you know, I was listening to the piece this morning, and you know, I was thinking, oh man, I don't hear those quotes from Haydn. I should know those, but I don't. You know, I didn't hear it. And it's not so super important to know what, you know, little bits of Haydn he was using, or to know where that Figaro thing comes up. If you miss it, it's fine. Knowing that it's there, however, is one of the cool things about just knowing that, you know, this piece was crafted in such a way that, you know, I can, if I want to, go back and back and back and back and back and keep discovering new things. It's never going to be the same experience twice. And on the first experience, the first performance that you're hearing of this piece, just open yourself up to be moved by the music. Because this music will move you. There's no way that it can't if you're open to it. And there aren't levels to the emotional impact of this piece. It just goes right to it. And that's one of the really great things about it. I think it's more approachable than the Missa Solemnis, for sure. And I just think, you know, thinking about what's going on in Beethoven's life right at this moment is, you know, right in the middle of Beethoven's life. And here he writes this thing that, you know, both looks back to Haydn, but also looks forward to the future of music, of what he's going to accomplish in the future. It's right at that sort of fulcrum moment, and I just think that's a cool experience too.
But if you heard the 1802 and the 1807, or whatever years you said, say one tonight and the other the next night, would you think that they sounded just totally, I mean, are they just totally different?
Well, they're by two different composers, so they would be.
Well, I know they are by two different composers. That's what I mean.
Right.
But
I think
Beethoven was a student of Haydn, and
in the same era.
heard it. So
Yeah.
I just wondered.
You know, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I think it would have to be a point that you made. Okay, so if you have a number of members of a family standing together, they're not twins, or say the children, they're not twins or anything like that, but they all look very much alike. Who are, you know, can you recognize each of them separately? Well, each of them might have different features, etc. And so that's a very, very bad example of how one might hear, you know, the differences. So you hear classical era music, meaning music that was composed between a certain date and a certain date, and it's considered classical era. So they might have similarities in language, but in the depth of the emotion and the material that the composer uses, that's where you will hear a lot of differences.
Yeah, emotion was much more covered and much more subtle in the earlier music of Haydn and Mozart. It's there, but it's, you know, it's not, you know, right there for you like it is in the music of Beethoven. My bad example would be frittata and quiche both contain eggs.
Yes, that's a good example. Right. Yeah, that's good.
But they're totally different dishes.
And don't be hard on yourself. I think maybe I've been getting too complex, and I think coming from a veteran, incredible host of a venerated radio, yes, just amazing. He's going to know how audiences need to open themselves. What's next?
I just wanted to say Beethoven's later music was romantic.
Absolutely, it moved over the bridge into that. Exactly, and this is starting to get there too in this. Oh, but he's right. I'm sorry, Leanna.
It's okay. I'm sure you know, Maria and the rest of the choir have a very long evening ahead of us, and I hope you're all going to show up at the concert at 5 o'clock. Let's give Brian and Maria.